Today, we're joined by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, and Ukrainian Archbishop Boris Gudziak. They're here to provide updates on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine and their respective offices' activities to provide support to those on the ground as Russia's invasion of their country continues into its third week. We're accepting questions here in the National Press Club's ballroom and via email. I expect there will be quite a few, and I will ask as many as time permits. Those in the room today may submit a question on the available question cards. They'll be distributed around here. And those joining virtually can send an email to headliners@press.org with Ukraine in the subject line. Please pass your cards to Kate or Lori here in the room. The situation in Ukraine is changing by the minute, with news just this morning that 3 European prime ministers from Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovenia are traveling to Kyiv by train to show support from the European Union, all while the city continues to be under attack. We'll hear more tomorrow directly from President Volodymyr Zelensky when he speaks to Congress at 9 a.m. According to a senior U.S. defense official who spoke to journalists on Background yesterday, Russian advances in Ukraine remain stalled. Yet reports from the ground continue to paint a grim picture, with major population centers such as Mariupol and Kharkiv under continued shelling, civilian casualties increasing, and nearly 3 million refugees fleeing the country. And particularly relevant to the National Press Club and our ongoing work supporting press freedom, several journalists have been injured or killed over the last few days. The United Nations and international relief organizations are working to address humanitarian needs inside Ukraine and in neighboring countries, including Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia. Some U.S. lawmakers are urging the Biden administration to make exceptions for Ukrainian refugees who are seeking entry into the U.S. to reconnect with their families. Our guests today have important insights to share on all this and more. Ambassador Markarova was appointed to her position in April 2021 after serving in Ukraine's Ministry of Finance. She played an instrumental role in improving the country's fiscal strength, reducing its debt to GDP to below 50%, and increasing its position in all major international data transparency ratings. Joining Ambassador Markarova is Archbishop Boris Gudziak, the 7th Metropolitan Archbishop of the Archieparchy of Philadelphia, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. He is chairman-elect of the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Domestic Justice and Human Development and is currently serving a 5-year term with the Vatican's Dicastery for Communication. Madam Ambassador, let's start with you. Welcome to the National Press Club, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for organizing this event and inviting us. I would like to start with the words of thank you to all journalists, to all of you who are here, but also especially to those who are in Ukraine today, risking their lives to tell the world the truth. Something that Ukraine desperately needs, something that the world desperately needs, something that is very important for the world to understand what really goes on in every city and village in Ukraine right now, and actually move the world to act quicker and more decisive. Today is 20th day of the brutal attack on Ukraine, but it's actually 8th year of war, because Russia attacked us in 2014. Russia illegally annexed Crimea. Russia illegally attacked Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast and occupied parts of its territories. We are at war, Russia is at war with us for the past 8 years. But during the past 20 days, this war turned into a full-scale genocide of Ukrainian people. Today, we all woke up to bombs and rocket launches at Kyiv. Residential areas in Kyiv have been targeted. It doesn't mean that everywhere else it stopped, because the city of Mariupol for 11 days now continued to be encircled and bombed and shelled and stormed by the Russian troops. The suburbs of Kyiv continue to be shelled at. The Dnipro city was also attacked today. There are also repeated shellings and attacks on pretty much everywhere in Ukraine. In addition to that, we clearly have evidence, and with the help of journalists, everyone has them now, that Russians are not actually targeting our armed forces. They are targeting civilians. They are killing children, pregnant women. They are killing elderly. This is a clear case of genocide. And, these war crimes have been appalling, and there is only one reason why Russians are doing it. They're trying to use this terror to scare us into submission and make sure or force us through this terror to surrender. Now, I've received personally several texts, of course, this night, especially from Kiev. And the only texts that people are sending me from either Kiev or used to send from Mariupol before the batteries and connection was out is, we are alive, don't worry, we are safe. Please ensure we have more weapons to fight with. So this is where we are right now. For 20 days, Ukraine is defending our homes. We are defending Ukraine, but we are also defending Europe, and we are defending democracy, and we are defending freedom. Because this is the only reason why Russia attacked us. We are a peaceful country. We never attacked anyone, even though we had all legal rights to reclaim part of Donetsk and Lugansk territories taken in 2014, and Crimea, which is illegally occupied by Russia. We never, during 8 years of war, tried to do it militarily. We always used a diplomatic path, and we always push for diplomatic solutions. So the only risk that there is from Ukraine to Russia is that we have chosen to be European, democratic, and free. And if that is something that scares Russian Federation, that none of us is safe. Therefore, right now, the Ukrainian armed forces, President Zelensky, our men, women, everyone in Ukraine is very resolute, and we know that we will not surrender. We will fight for our homes. We will continue this fight, and all we need from all of our partners is immediate increase in military support in order to be able to sustain this fight. We also are here to talk about the humanitarian, of course, situation. And it's a humanitarian catastrophe of massive disaster, of massive proportions. First, the loss of lives and the attack on human beings in Ukraine. I mean, the 3 million who were forced to flee the country. People who are in encircled cities without food, water, or access to basic medical supply. Kids who do not go to schools for the past 20 days. All of that. But in addition to that, Russians specifically target all our cultural objects and our churches. If you read the newsline, this is barbaric. The churches, the Greek Orthodox churches, the Greek Catholic churches, the Orthodox churches, synagogues, mosques, nothing is off limit to them. The universities. Some of the universities literally are obliterated. There is nothing left in many cities. And so everything that they are doing definitely does not match the fake pretext that Russians and Russian President Putin said at the beginning of this war. They are attacking the civilians. They're trying to exterminate Ukrainians. And we will not give up. So I would like to finish with only 3 words and asks. What is it that we need from all of our partners and friends? And we are very thankful for the support, especially for the support that the United States is providing us. But we need priority number 1, more weapons and more tools that our armed forces and all the volunteers and every citizen needs in order to be able to defend our home from brutal foreign invader, Russian Federation. B, we need all the humanitarian assistance that we can get, especially inside Ukraine, especially to those cities that are encircled. And we need all the diplomatic power that the world can put together in order to force Russia to allow the humanitarian corridors, which they deny us for the past 20 days. And 3, we need sanctions. And we've seen that the world put together all the resources and decisiveness in order to put the sanctions on. And the US, we again would like to thank the United States for being a leader in this process. But we need more. We have to isolate Russia completely. They cannot be in any of the international organizations. They cannot sit around the table unless they stop this brutal aggression, cease fire, and get out from our country. This has implications for all of us. It's not about Ukraine only. The world as we knew it and the security infrastructure, global infrastructure, which all countries worked so hard to set after the World War II, is no longer there. So the question actually to all of us is it okay for an autocratic, aggressive nuclear power to attack a neighboring state and get away with it? And I'm positive that all of us together, all the civilized world, has to answer decisively no. Thank you very much.
Madam Ambassador Jen, friends. Stalin said the death of one person is a tragedy, the suffering of millions is statistics. It's really important to kind of sit back and imagine what is happening. On the way here, I talked to Gennady Mokhnenko, a minister in Mariupol. He's right now outside the city. In the last 20 years, Gennady, a Protestant minister, has adopted 35 children, 35 orphans. Yesterday, an orphan that he raised from childhood, Victoria Sakharova, just like the Russian physicist and dissident, Victoria Sakharova was killed. She leaves her child, a three-year-old boy who's an orphan. Gennady does not know what is the fate of this boy. You saw the pictures of tanks firing at apartment buildings. That's exactly what happened to Gennady's adopted daughter. Two Orthodox priests have been killed. Actually, three, I think. Yesterday there was a third one killed. In the last 250 years, every time Russia has taken over any part of Ukrainian territory where the Ukrainian Catholic Church is ministered, it has been strangled. It happened a couple times in the 19th century, it happened in the 20th century, and it was happening now in Crimea and in the Donbass. There are 3 million refugees. We're incredibly grateful to all you and all whom you represent, your audiences. The world has come together to support Ukraine, and Ukraine has won this war morally. I think it's very important to see the positive things in this tragedy. The world has come together. I used to be bishop in Paris for 7 years, and I saw before my eyes how Brexit, how other fissures were breaking apart the European community. There's now new unity, new purpose in the European Union because of the witness of Ukrainians who are giving their life for their friends. You know, Jesus said, it's John 15:13, there's no greater love than when one gives one's life for his friends. And that's why you're inspired. You're here, and the world is watching and listening because it sees the greatest love. It sees the greatest sacrifice. It's really important to help people understand why they are inspired. This is David and Goliath. This is a biblical message. And it's inspiring everybody. Our friends in Japan, we're very grateful for Japanese solidarity and sanctions. Our friends in the Muslim world, who are coming to realize that Ukraine is home to a Muslim population that is fervently, passionately patriotic. It's Ukrainian. In Crimea, the Muslim Tatars were deported by Stalin, welcomed back by Ukraine, and they today, already for 8 years, have been persecuted under the Russian occupation. It's very important for people from Indonesia, from Pakistan, in the Arab countries, to understand that Ukrainians are dying for the freedom of religion of Muslims who are comfortable in Ukraine. There's a Jewish president. Most people can't fathom that 70% of Ukrainians voted for a Jewish candidate. There is great fraternal unity and love in this country. Something that those who drink the Russian Kool-Aid don't understand. People are surprised that Kharkiv is standing up. I talked to the bishop of Kharkiv this morning. The bishop of Kharkiv has received, the Ukrainian Catholic bishop has received an Orthodox bishop who lived on the outskirts. His windows were blown out, his apartment building was damaged, so he's living with the Ukrainian Catholic bishop. There's no electricity tonight. There's a shortage of food and water. But the population is coming together. The churches are feeding people. They're getting humanitarian aid in. Kharkiv is not fully encircled like Mariupol. Over 600 apartment buildings and dwellings in Kharkiv have been damaged or destroyed. Most of the population is left. But the defenders are there. And the question is, will the world help the defenders? We need massive humanitarian aid, and there's been a massive response. But I'll put it bluntly. What good is it if you feed the stomachs of these children, these women, these people in cities, if their brains are going to be blown out? If their buildings, their apartment buildings are going to be rendered into rubble? There needs to be massive defensive and massive humanitarian aid. Hats off, if I may, to countries like Poland. Poland's taken 1.5 million refugees. It's at a saturation point, but if you've been following it, the love. Did you see all those strollers at the Polish border? The Polish population is bringing everything to the fleeing masses. In each case, almost in each case, a family is divided because men cannot leave. So women are leaving with their children. The husbands are staying behind. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians are returning to Ukraine to defend the innocent, to protect the hospitals, to guide and accompany the refugees. There's an incredible moral moment in the world today. The world has not been united like this for decades. And Ukraine is at the center of it. It's a miracle, my friends. So we ask you to pray. Prayer brought down the Soviet Union, not a war, not great policies. A great superpower, armed to its teeth with nuclear weapons, felt like the house of cards it was. It was a moral ruin, and it could not morally stand. We ask you to inform. There's one main reason why Ukraine is being attacked. It's being attacked because it's a democracy, and it has the disease of freedom of the press, freedom of religion, elections, a vital civic society. All of this is a dangerous virus for autocracy, for oligarchic kleptocracy, and for what Putin stands for. It's very sad that today the Russian Orthodox Church in its leadership stands with President Putin. It stands for this war. It stands against the defense of innocence. The most negative example for the Russian population. And this needs to be named. This needs to be called out. We thank you for doing this. We thank you for being careful and vigilant. We thank you for understanding that Ukraine is not threatening Russia. Ukraine had 900,000 soldiers at the time of its independence. It came down to 6,000 battle-ready troops in 2014. Is that a country with aggressive intentions? Ukraine is the first country, dear friends, that unilaterally dismantled its nuclear arsenal in 1994, receiving guarantees from the US, Great Britain, and Russia about its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Is that a country that is threatening anybody? It's threatening with ideas, with its moral stance, with its love. And that has inspired you and inspired the world. And we can be confident that the Lord will be with the people who love. The Lord supported David against Goliath. And your good word, the word of truth, will go out and it will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the both of you for joining us and for talking about everything that you're seeing and witnessing in your country. I'm going to start off with the biggest question I think we are all thinking in the U.S., which is, what do you want to see most from the U.S. and from NATO? You know, we've talked about you want military equipment, but what about some of the other things that you may need from the United States and from NATO that you're asking for or that you would like to ask for both of you?
Well, I will start with, first of all, you know, you all remember when the war started, this phase of the war, because again, I always reiterate that the war started in 2014. And should the response was more decisive in 2014, we might have not been in this situation now. So we all have to remember it, that in every passing day is a chance to put an end to this war, but we have to be decisive. We have to answer today's challenges with today's decisions, not something we have discussed yesterday. So on the military support, I mean, we are attacked from east, north, south by the army that is much larger than our army. Now, we've seen that army is a demoralized army. We've seen that our brave men and women of the armed forces, National Guard, border guards, and territorial defense are motivated, and they are defending fiercely every inch of our territory. We see that their military soldiers are surrendering by dozens, and they have no idea why they are in Ukraine, or they are committing the war crimes because, you know, they don't know what the soldiers' honor is. I wouldn't even call them a Russian army, because armies do not fight like this. Armies do not kill children. But what we need is the supply of any type of weapons that we can receive, with a special focus on the anti-air and everything to stop their dominance in the air. Because again, when they saw that they cannot achieve anything on the ground, and I just have to remind you that at the beginning they said that Kyiv would fall in 20 hours. They have sent their troops in without any support or any logistical support for more than 1 or 2 days. When they saw that they are not able to do it, which is a disgrace for an army of whatever, the second largest army, or whatever they claim to be, they resorted to terror. So air is something that we need an urgent support with. Protect Ukraine from these brutal attacks they are doing from the air. And this is the ask number one, and this is something that we are discussing with all of our friends and allies.
Okay. And what are you seeing?
I won't repeat, maybe I'll just continue. There's a great need for armored ambulances. There's a great need for medicine, for bandages that clot blood, all kinds of tubes, all kinds of things that in hospitals need to be replaced with each patient. There's a need for insulin. All kinds of medicine is needed in the country. Of course, there's need for food and clothing. But also, it's important to realize that this is a hybrid war. There needs to be cyber protection. There needs to be clear information. Today, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, said, you know, we kind of made a mistake in 2014. Why did people make a mistake? Because they didn't understand. George Bush in 2001 looked into the soul of Vladimir Putin and said, he's straightforward and a trustworthy man. Barack Obama ridiculed Mitt Romney in 2012 when Romney said that Russia is the greatest geopolitical. The previous president embraced Putin, and on the second day of the invasion called it an act of genius. These kind of either naive, ignorant, or willfully negative stances are influencers. It's very important to understand what the truth on the ground is. And today this message is slowly getting out, but there's still very many, and you know who they are, the purveyors of misinformation. And this needs to be countered.
Talk about a little bit more about the disinformation that we're seeing from Russia. Can you detail some examples where you've seen Russia succeed with their disinformation, and also some examples where Ukrainians have been able to come back and maybe dispel some of these mistruths that Russia has been spreading as well?
Well, to be frank, everything coming out from Russia is a disinformation at this moment. Starting from claiming that it's a special operation, not war, claiming that they are not shooting at civilians, claiming that they are somehow there to demilitarize or protect somebody in Ukraine. Everything that we hear from either the Russian leaders or Russian journalists, who I think, it's the propaganda servers, not journalists actually, is not even a misinformation, it's an outright lie. Because what we see, and we all witness it, not only on the ground, but online, thanks to all the journalists, but also to people who are recording and witnessing to the outside world, what we see is brutal, unjustified, unprovoked war crimes that are being committed against Ukrainians on a daily basis. Now, we didn't want Russians to come, neither in Kyiv, nor in Kharkiv, Sumy, Akhtirka, Mariupol, whether we speak Ukrainian, Russian, or any other language, whether we are Christians of any of the denominations, or Muslim, or Jewish, or any other religion, all of us just wanted one thing: to live peacefully in our own country and decide for ourselves what we want to do. To elect our officials, to elect our presidents, change them regularly, fight with each other when we need to fight, argue with each other, make our mistakes, but do it ourselves, without the occupying force that has been occupying Ukraine for the past 400 years, whether it was called Russian Federation, Russian Empire, Soviet Union, or whatever. We just wanted to live as a sovereign country. And everything that they're doing now, from, again, those that take the decisions, to military criminals on the ground in Ukraine, to students who are supporting Mr. Putin in Russia, which is a disgrace again, to so-called journalists, to everyone in Russia who are silent today, who are silently not only approving this, but supporting this. All of them are accomplices to the war crimes that Russians are committing in Ukraine. So, we are doing everything possible, not only to defend our country, but spread the truth about it. And again, I just cannot thank enough to all the brave men and women journalists who are on the ground, risking their lives, witnessing it with their cameras, with their eyes, and spreading the truth.
Jen, you and all of you colleagues, you heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, in Istanbul, I think 4 days ago, say, we did not invade. We did not invade. That is how blatant the lie is. On this Sunday, you asked for examples. Patriarch Kirill gave a giant icon of the Mother of God to a leader of the Russian National Guard who said in response, well, we've been a little slow in our advance in this invasion, but with the help of the Mother of God, we will denazify Ukraine. This is happening in the biggest church in the capital of Russia. The patriarch is giving the mother of God to these war criminals. The Pope said this was a sacrilege. Pope Francis called it a sacrilege. 700 leaders of Russian universities have come out in support of this war. There's a paranoia. There's a paranoia of propaganda, of fear, and of aggression that is capturing large segments of the Russian population. And that is a big population with many connections who for decades has been presenting a historical narrative, a nostalgia for empire, a plan for recolonization that includes the church, it includes business, it includes the oligarchs. All of a sudden, Mr. Abramovich is, being sanctioned. Did he do something yesterday or the day before? He's been doing this for 20 years, 30 years. But it was convenient for bankers, investment companies, real estate agents, all kinds of businesses in London to have his money. All the fans celebrating Chelsea's victories in soccer did not realize that this was at the cost of the Russian population who was robbed of its resources. All those yachts, those golden toilets. Finally, there's attention to them. It's not news. Those who knew, but nobody was listening to them. It's a giant system built on lies, built on thievery, built on thuggery, built on murder, and today it's trying to save its future by war crimes. This needs to be said very clearly. And finally, it is happening with your help.
Thank you. For you, Ambassador, what is your greatest challenge as a diplomat in navigating this sort of ever-changing situation on the ground?
Well, none of us is prepared to work in a war. I used to be a Minister of Finance. And when you were introducing me and you recited what I've done when I was a minister, the fiscal consolidation, the debt to GDP ratio, attracting investments, everything. Something that I was very proud of, a month ago. Something that I would be stressing on a month ago, but it seems like in another life now. So when my president asked me to serve in this position, and of course I couldn't say no, the task was to develop the strategic relations with the United States, which we successfully put to a new high in 2021. We signed the Strategic Partnership Charter. For the first time, we signed the Defense Framework Agreement. We started developing on all major items of potential cooperation, from economic to financial to human rights to freedom of press. We were at a very good start with the new administration to a much deeper and better relations between our countries. And we share a lot, because I think this, passion for entrepreneurship, for freedom, for democracy, and I used to say before the war, and our willingness to fight for it. This is something that unites our countries. I think now I don't need even to say it. Everyone sees it for the past 20 days, that not only we love our country and we love our freedom and democracy, that we are willing to fight for it. We are fighting for it now. But the challenge is, of course, the hardest job is done back home. And I admire our president, our chief commanders, everyone, every man and woman in Kyiv, in Mariupol, in Kharkiv, in Vorzel, in Bucha, in Lviv, in everywhere in Ukraine, who are today 120% of their times are devoted day and night to defense of our country. We, as a small part of our all Ukrainian army, our diplomatic force, are inspired by them, and we work 24/7 too. We will do everything possible to help our country to win this war, to bring Russia to justice, to bring peace to Ukraine, but peace that will also mean victory. Because again, Ukrainians will never surrender.
And for you, Archbishop, how has the Catholic Church been responding to the crisis in Ukraine, in your view, and what more can be done?
The Catholic Church is trying to pray, to inform, and to help. The head of our church this morning called for a particular attention to the aged, who cannot be moved, who cannot escape, who can't even make it down maybe to the bomb shelters or the basements of the apartment buildings. So Sviatoslav Shevchuk, the Major Archbishop of Kiev, is speaking every day to the world. He's visiting different bomb shelters or soup kitchens in different cities of the country. The bishops and the priests are out there on the front lines. The lay people are volunteers. In these refugee centers, many are preparing food for transport to the west, to the east. There's great difficulty in logistics. It's very difficult to transport anything in a country that is being bombed. But there's also great unity. Many of us are, kind of on edge throughout this whole thing. It's been months when we knew this was coming, and now it's been almost full 3 weeks of this comprehensive war. I know the ambassador hasn't gotten much sleep. But every time we call Ukraine, whether it's relatives or friends, whether it's professional colleagues, I serve as the president of the Ukrainian Catholic University, and I speak with the rector and students on a daily basis. Whether we call church people or people in government, we're inspired. They're saying, it's tough, it's terrible. But there's a deep conviction, there's a deep peace. And that is what is allowing an army that is outnumbered in resources 10 to 1 to stand. That is what is helping people not to panic. You've seen that there hasn't been panic. There are refugees leaving, and mothers need to take their children out of these circumstances. But the men are staying. Hundreds of thousands, probably 200,000 men have joined the territorial defense units. How to organize all of this in 20 days is a big challenge. But the Catholic Church and the other churches that are united, because there's an all-Ukrainian council of churches and religious organizations, Orthodox, Catholics, East and West, Protestants, Muslims, Jews are united in a stance against this war, and they're working each and together for humanitarian aid to help people stand strong.
Okay. Have you spoken directly to Pope Francis about the situation in Ukraine at this point? And if you have, what was discussed?
I spoke to him 5 weeks ago before the war. And I asked him to call Vladimir Putin. And he said maybe that could be done. He said that could be done, like that, with a smile. And I think he's been doing everything he can behind the scenes. You saw he made an unprecedented step. Pope Francis went to the Russian embassy to lodge a protest. And I am convinced that he's made every effort to speak to Putin. And I have some information that he has not gotten responses to his gestures towards Patriarch Kirill, but I think that will change. I am hoping the Russian church leadership will open up and hear the gospel. Do not kill.
We talked about the humanitarian crisis, and Poland is almost at capacity receiving refugees. How are you engaging with your counterparts from Poland and from other countries receiving refugees? What support do they hope to receive from, say, the US in helping to manage all of this?
Well, I think, even before the war started, we have been working on a daily basis with not only our colleagues from the United States. And I mean, we have to give credit to the administration, because before the war, Secretary Blinken was on the phone with pretty much all leaders and everyone who he could reach, and President Biden, in order to deter Russia from this. So, of course, now we are focusing on this 20 days, but there was a big, effort to deter it. And of course, I mean, it was difficult to do it, as the decision to start the war is only one person's decision. But right now, we are working very closely. And again, I would like to thank all of our neighbors that are today helping us, helping with defensive weapons, helping with humanitarian support, and welcoming our people through the border, trying to help in any way possible. So, of course, there is a big coordination center in all of these countries on the ground. There is big coordination center and lots of work with the authorities from Kyiv. And again, you have to understand that it's also remarkable, not only that our president has said, I'm staying in Kyiv, I'm in Kyiv, I'm fighting together with my people, I'm leading my country through this, but the cabinet of ministers, every minister being bombed at, is working day and night. The infrastructure, the electricity grid, everything. Trying to organize the logistic inside the country. The firefighters and other people who are reacting quickly to these bombings of the peaceful civilians and to our homes. So we are working, but we're also working here, all of the ambassadors, and I will not name them because I don't want to miss anyone, but all the ambassadors from European countries, and not only from European countries, from the CARICOM countries, from South America, Japan. I mean, we are in constant contact with all of our friends and allies, trying to find a way how to do it better. And I think on the humanitarian assistance, again, there is this big willingness and readiness, and we are doing everything possible. But our message to not only to the United States, but to all of our friends and allies, we have to understand that we are living now in the 1939 moment. It's not enough just to help Ukraine to fight it on our territory. We have to do it together. Because Putin repeatedly said, and all of his leaders around him, and everything that we hear from Russia, that they will not stop in Ukraine, that it's not only about Ukraine. It's about redrawing the borders in Europe. It's about redrawing the security infrastructure. It's about rebuilding that empire. So none of us who is democratic and believes in democracy is safe. And we have to act faster, and we have to unite, and we have to give a decisive response while it's still local. Because people in 1939 failed to do so. And we cannot afford to do it this time.
Okay. This question comes from a National Press Club member, Rick Dunham. Ukraine has maintained a friendly relationship with China, but China has also recently restated its no-limits relationship with Russia. It is widely reported that Russia has requested military assistance from China. What risk does China run with the relationship with Ukraine and the world if Beijing chooses to offer Putin a military or economic safety net to help him prosecute the war in Ukraine? I think they recently mentioned that they could potentially give missiles, for instance, to the Russians as they run out. So, thoughts on that?
Well, we didn't see the confirmations. We saw the discussion in the press, but I just want to say that Russia is becoming a pariah state, with the massive economic sanctions, with the solid response from the collective civilized world, with 141 countries joining the UN resolution to condemn Russia's actions, and only 4 countries actually supporting these actions. And I don't think anyone would want to join this club of the pariahs of these 5 countries, including Russia. So the economic sanctions that have been implemented already, especially on the financial and banking system and trade, and we're very grateful to the US for the embargoes on the energy resources, and we really hope that all European countries will join as well. But all of that is not only affecting Russia, which it should, but it also sends a very clear message to all other countries that if they decide to play the game of helping Russia right now, then they would make their economies and their people a target for any type of secondary sanctions. And as much as, we saw the statements before the war from the meetings of the leaders of China and Russia, I don't think China wants to be associated and have blood on their hands. I don't think China wants to risk all of their economic progress and development associating or helping a war crime country like Russia. So again, we of course will respond to any official communication and comment on it, but I think it's pretty clear, it should be pretty clear for any country on our planet that they have to be on the side of the light and they have to do everything possible to stop the evil rather than helping it. And it's equally so about those countries which are trying to help Russia to bypass some of the sanctions, smaller countries, and make some money for their budgets out of it. Those are bloody money, and countries should be aware of it. And like many, and it's equally so about corporations. Those companies that were not sanctioned, or those sectors that were not sanctioned. But we see so many of American, especially companies that are voluntarily limiting their businesses in Russia and leaving. Because they remember how those that helped Hitler during the previous war have been destroyed morally and ceased to exist after the democratic world prevailed in 1945. So it's for all of the companies that have the ESG principles or who say about the good corporate governance or good standards that they are obeying, they have to walk the walk. They have to show that it's not only something they have on their websites and something they discuss at their board meetings or at the general shareholders meeting and put into their reports. It's something they live up to. So I think, again, it's for countries, for companies, for everyone, this is a moment of truth.
I think we have some time just for a few more questions. Do you think Russia's ready to involve in serious diplomacy to end the war? I know this is a little bit of a crystal ball question, but how do you envision the end of this crisis, the end of this war?
There is only one person that started it, Mr. Putin, and there is one person who has to stop it. So again, it's very black and white. It's Russia that crossed our border. It's Russia that attacked our country. It's Russia that is shelling our cities and killing our civilians. Now, as our president said, from the day one, and we are responding to any possibility to have the negotiations and to have diplomacy working on humanitarian corridors and everything else. But any good faith negotiations require stopping ceasefire and stopping killing us. There is nothing Ukraine did to start it, and there is nothing we can do to actually stop them shooting at us. It's up to them. So we have a saying in Ukraine that if Russia stops shooting, the war will stop. If Ukraine will stop shooting today, our country will disappear. So it's totally up to Russia. But again, we will never stop trying to use any diplomatic channel, and we will respond and we will go talk. And our president repeatedly said that he's ready to talk with any of the moderators directly in order to relay our position and in order to be able to stop this war.
Okay.
But without surrendering. That, I think, we have been very clear from day one.
I've heard some stories from both of you on what you've been hearing about and from people on the ground in Ukraine. But looking back on the last 20 odd days, what is the story that has impacted you the most personally?
There are so many. It's really difficult to pick one. People who are women given birth in the bomb shelters. Children, for 20 days living under the constant attack. A 10-year-old girl shot by a Russian tank in the suburbs of Kiev. People lying on the ground. I mean, we've seen this photos from the territories that temporarily controlled by the Russian forces to the north of Kiev, where near the churches, our priests have to bury people in the mass graves without even knowing who they are, because there are people lying on the streets in the center of Europe, dead bodies, in the 21st century. So all of it.
Maybe most striking for me has been that video clip of the mother and two children in Irpin being led out, trying to dash across a street in there with their little suitcases and being hit by a mortar. That man, those who were behind that mortar, they knew what they were doing. They saw that that was a woman with two children with little wheelbarrows, and they obliterated them. That was filmed by American journalists, one of whom, not the filmers, but in that same city was killed 2 days later. It's before the eyes of the world. And that's iconic, it's symbolic of both the helplessness, but the great courage of journalists and the great will of the country to maintain its dignity. The priests that are going down into bomb shelters. My friends, the bishops in Kharkiv, a city, he said last night we couldn't sleep. It was being hit by so many rockets. But they're at peace. Ultimately, in a deep place in their hearts, they're at peace, they're serving, and they're not afraid. People are not afraid of death. We don't know how to deal with death anymore in many Western societies in the 21st century. We think it's the abyss, that it's the end. But most civilization is built on a belief in eternal life, and the fact that we're called to live with God. And those who are fearless before death witness to a faith in eternal life. And I think that is a witness that is deeply touching the world today, and it's deeply touching my heart.
Well, thank you so much to the both of you for sharing all of that. Before we conclude today's discussion, let me take a moment to thank Headliners co-team leaders Donna Leinwin-Legere and Lori Russo, as well as immediate past president Lisa Matthews, who helped to organize today's event. Club Communications Director Kate Helster and Club Executive Director Bill McCarran. I'm going to ask one last question. I know many people in the American public want to know how can they help? What are some of the ways that we can help from here?
Well, first, of course, express your opinion and your willingness to stand with Ukraine. It's very important, I think. Again, for us, being a democratic country, and our leaders listening and leading now the country together with people. And that's why Russians actually are abducting our mayors, because all Ukrainian mayors are standing and fighting with their cities and organizing a defense, and there is nothing Russians can do. They're scaring them, they're offering them money, but they're staying with people, even in the encircled cities. So I think this is where, you know, every American can make a difference and essentially say that we see this big support here on the street of Washington. Everything is blue and yellow. You know, convey this to your government, convey it to your congressmen, senators, convey it to everyone here that American people are with Ukrainian people. And help in any way possible. Any help is important now and very, very much appreciated. If you can help with donations, do that. And we have a number of accounts in Ukraine, a number of organizations that can effectively put it to use. If you can help with welcoming some of the refugees, we're very grateful for that. We also would like to ask American universities to help. We have many Ukrainian students who are here in the universities, and we would like them to continue studying. We would like them, it's our greatest resource when we will win, because there is no question in our mind that we will win this war. And we will need to rebuild our country. And all these talents that we have here, we will need them. But we need help from the American universities because some of them have lost everything in Ukraine. Some of their parents are fighting for the country now. So whatever can be done in order to allow them and provide them scholarships in order to continue studying in the US. So in every field, there is something anyone can do to make a difference. And we would appreciate any help.
Thank you.
I would ask Americans to pray, and I explained why, to inform. And in terms of help, there's a few concrete things. Before the refugees can come here, there needs to be a policy for these refugees. There is no policy. The US is way behind the European countries. There's good intention. We receive in our offices countless phone calls of people who are willing to receive refugees, but they can't get visas. They can't get into the United States. This needs to be very clearly addressed. Great Britain is behind. The US is behind. Poland has given an example. The other neighboring countries, the countries in the heart of Europe, Germany and Western Europe and France, have given an example. US needs to move. There needs to be scholarship programs, not only for the students that are here, but the students that are refugees. Most of them are women, because young men students cannot leave. So programs for women and children. In Poland, by the end of this week, there will be, I heard 500,000 Ukrainian places for Ukrainian children in schools. Poland has opened up the schools to the Ukrainian children that have been brought out by their parents. We need these kind of actions here in the United States, and medical supplies. Armored ambulances, all kinds of hospital supplies, all kinds of drugs and surgical instruments. These are particularly needed.
Well, thank you again to the both of you for coming. You're welcome here any day of the week, every day if you want. We're happy to host you so you can continue to talk about what's happening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Именно такие войны в современную эпоху будут во всех точках нашей планеты, если будут. И конечный итог или конечная точка этой гибридной войны, конечно же, военная агрессия. Пока мы до этого не дошли. И вы, как никто, понимаете остроту ситуации. Красноречиво говорят о ней и раскрытые силами КГБ планы по совершению насильственных экстремистских действий в отношении представителей государственных средств массовой информации, судей, депутатского корпуса, сотрудников силовых структур и членов их семей. В 2021 году органами госбезопасности Республики Беларусь во взаимодействии с иными государственными структурами предотвращено 11 попыток совершения терактов, организованных и профинансированных с территории Польши, Литвы, Украины, США и Германии. Но это то, что мы знаем, и то, что можем сказать. Благодаря усилиям, в том числе находящихся в зале сотрудников, задокументирована и пресечена деятельность сети так называемых спящих ячеек проекта «Рабочий рух», курируемого спецслужбами Соединенных Штатов Америки и Литвы. Участниками данного экстремистского формирования планировались диверсии с гибелью людей на объектах Оршанского и Минского железнодорожных узлов, на предприятиях Гродно-Азот, Гомсельмаш, Нафтан, БМЗ. Для корректировки западной санкционной политики через сеть информаторов осуществлялся и до сих пор осуществляется сбор закрытых данных о механизмах противодействия экономическим ограничениям. Или возьмем, например, референдум по изменению Конституции Республики Беларусь. Мы провели его без происшествий. Но посмотрите, какие надежды связывали с этим событием наши беглые. Разработанный экстремистской организацией так называемый план Перамоа предусматривал организацию серии терактов на территории страны, что послужило бы поводом для социального взрыва. Кое-кто за рубежом не скрывал, что таковым могла бы послужить провокация с гибелью людей, но это для них вообще был бы подарок, священнослужителей или иной сакральной жертвы. От этих идей они не отказываются и сегодня. К счастью, мы держим ситуацию под контролем. Также не дали желаемого результата все задействованные для срыва конституционной кампании механизмы: информационная агрессия, попытки кибератак на объекты жизнеобеспечения, железнодорожного транспорта, промышленности, энергетики, правоохранительные органы. При этом я хотел бы из этой череды выделить отдельно те попытки кибератак, которые предпринимались против нас. Это сродни биологическому оружию и еще даже мощнее. Не надо ни танки, ни пулеметы, ни ракеты высокоточные, ничего не надо. Достаточно совершить массированные кибератаки на экономические объекты, субъекты любой страны, и этого будет достаточно, чтобы перевернуть страну. Поэтому этому направлению борьбы и КГБ, и другим структурам надо уделить особое внимание. Исполнителям названных мною планов пора признать, что свой последний шанс реабилитировать себя перед спонсорами они потеряли в день референдума. Это у них был час пик. Получится, выведут на улицу народ, перевернут страну, деньги дадут. Не получится, денег не будет. Поэтому сегодня на голодном пайке рыщут по всей планете, от Соединенных Штатов Америки до Японии, чтобы найти деньги. Не получилось. Начали под разные программы, в данном случае на войну в Украине. Слушайте, нет войне, кричат везде, а формируют батальоны из обезумевших белорусских граждан. А под это просят деньги. Ну, ясно, что если даже деньги диаспора или кто-то за рубежом соберет и направит им, то 99% этих денег осядет у них в карманах, как это было до сих пор. Наконец-то Запад начал это понимать. и деньгами не разбрасываются. Ну, может, потому что уже у самих не так много их. Собственно, уже после провала мятежа ставка была сделана на новые лица. На это обратите особое внимание. Которые, по мнению западных кураторов, возглавят протесты, причиной которых, по расчетам заказчика, станет эффект от санкций. То есть санкции возбудят народ, взбудоражат, и они потом сядут на этого коня. Должен сказать, что ничего из этого не получится. Вы это понимаете, скоро поймут и простые граждане. Мы не производим ту продукцию, которую невозможно продать на рынках, допустим, России и Китая. Я уже не говорю о том, что мы сегодня торгуем, наверное, где-то со 100 странами, если не больше. Но нам достаточно даже этих рынков и ту продукцию, которую мы производим, слава Богу, она всегда будет востребована на этих рынках. Вчера закончились переговоры делегаций России и Беларуси в развитии моей встречи с президентом Путиным. Я не стану детализировать, придет время, об этом расскажем, но то, за что мы боролись с Россией всегда, случилось. Наконец-то у руководства России, да и у всех россиян, сформировалось твердое понимание, что мы должны быть вместе, что Беларусь также нужна России, как нужна нам огромная Россия. Поэтому мы оттуда покупали, получали энергоресурсы, энергоносители, мы их будем получать. Примерно по тем же, можно сказать, ценам, примерно, как в Российской Федерации. То, что мы всегда требовали от России. И там будет востребовано все, что мы производим. И легкая промышленность, и нефтепереработка, нефтехимия. Все, что мы производим на этом огромном рынке в России и Китае, нужно будет. Поэтому нашим людям не надо бегать по зауголью, по закоулкам, где бы это выменить доллар на рубль. Ну, выменили, нахватались. Сейчас этот доллар уже потихоньку начинает проседать, потому что никому не нужен будет завтра. Особенно в связи с этими санкциями, которые введены против нас. Скорее, наверное, будем скоро бороться, чтобы лишний российский рубль был в кармане или юань, потому что с этими странами мы в основном будем торговать. Управляемая из Вильнюса, Варшавы, Киева, а реально из Вашингтона, пятая колонна – это, повторю, уже другие люди. Тут они делают правильно. Замусоленные лица надо менять. Они обучаются под эгидой спецслужб США, стран Западной Европы в условиях повышенной конспирации. Обучаются на территории отдельных сопредельных государств по аналогии с абвершколами периода Великой Отечественной войны. Опыт пригодился им. Уже сегодня планируется внедрение подготовленной там так называемой новой элиты в различные сферы нашего общества. В государственный аппарат, прежде всего, силовые структуры, общественные организации, средства массовой информации. Ставятся задачи ползучей трансформации белорусского государства в интересах Запада, распродажи наиболее ценных экономических активов, изменение политического курса страны. Изменение политического курса – это и есть попытка передела сфер влияния в регионе. Очевидно, что конечная цель – Россия, Китай и их устранение как конкурентов на геополитической карте мира. События, которые происходят вокруг Украины, являются прямым тому доказательством. Ну, я уже иногда говорил, наша вина только, уважаемые друзья, в том, что Господь взял и поселил нас вот здесь, в центре Европы. Не обойти, не объехать. Кажется, и страна небольшая, но все шли через нее, спотыкались, падали, поднимались, ползли, но шли. Ну, на злобу. 812 год. Первая мировая война, ну и середина прошлого столетия. Вы помните 41-45 годы, во что они нам обошлись? Наш народ в чем-то был виноват? Нет. Так будет всегда, потому что интересы пересекаются через Беларусь. И нам надо выстроить так политику, чтобы удержать свою страну, как бы не было трудно. Что касается Украины, вы внимательно следите за ситуацией. Еще раз хочу подчеркнуть, вы это лучше знаете, чем другие люди. Мы не собираемся ввязываться в эту операцию, которую Россия проводит в Украине. Самое главное, как военным вам говорю, в этом нет никакой необходимости. Ну подумайте, что мы можем там в России добавить? Что? Что касается личного состава, там предостаточно своих воинов. Мы что-то можем в России с точки зрения вооружений добавить? Да нет. Мы это все закупаем у Российской Федерации. У них это все есть. И даже лучше. Поэтому нам там делать нечего, и нас туда не зовут. Но наша задача, это очень важно в любом бою, не только в войне, предупредить нападение с тыла на продвигающиеся войска российские. Вот этого мы никогда не должны допустить. Никогда. Это будет сродни предательству. Я об этом сказал в первые дни. Мы это и делаем, потому что это еще нам и нужно, как государству, чтобы защитить свои рубежи на северо-западе, западе, да уже сегодня и на юге. Я вас предупреждал, что нас будут толкать в эту операцию, в эту войну. Нас будут пытаться туда втянуть. Свидетельством тому является буквально 2 дня тому назад ночью пуск очередной на территорию нашей Беларуси, удар по нашей территории ракетой .У, которую мы успешно с россиянами перехватили и уничтожили над Припятью. Где-то там возле речки валяется. Кому интересно, кто ближе, сходите, посмотрите. Это не закрыто, это не фейк, то, что я вам говорю. Просто мы об этом не говорили. Нам надо было разобраться, что там происходит. Что это такое? Они что, одной ракетой хотят разбомбить Беларусь? Да не получится. Эта ракета просто не долетит до нас. Но зачем это делается? Для того, чтобы нас возбудить и чтобы мы начали отвечать. Но мы не такие простачки. Мы, если ответим, то ответим прилично уже. Что почувствуют все. Пока терпим. Как я уже говорил ранее, все, о чем я говорю, это новая реальность, в которой нам предстоит работать и после завершения операции в нашей родной и близкой нам Украине. Нашу экономику, как и прежде, будут испытывать санкциями. Но мы можем их преодолеть, мы их преодолеваем. В силу того, как я уже сказал, что все, что мы на 90% получаем для производства в России, и то, что мы продаем в основном в Российскую Федерацию. Нам надо отладить платежи. Но у нас достаточно ума у наших специалистов и в Национальном банке, и в правительстве для того, чтобы решить эту проблему. Мы ее решаем. Но посмотрите, кто бы мог подумать, мы все время, ваши жены, некоторых, куда ездили? Тряпки покупать или еще что-то? В Литву, в Польшу. Там все было дешево. Продукты питания дешевле, еще чего-то и так далее. Потому что демпинговал весь Запад, поставляя продукцию в Литву, зная о том, что мы ее там купим. Мы вывозили валюту. Что сегодня происходит? Сегодня граница же была закрыта. Боялись ковида с Беларуси. Но дело же не в ковиде, вы же понимаете. Границу закрыли, чтобы мы туда не двигались. Сегодня забыли о беженцах, о ковиде, открыли границу и просят хотя бы немного муки, гречки и соли. Ну, благо, Мозер-соль работает, можем тоннами, 1000 тонн продать этой соли. Это тоже наша возможность, чтобы вы знали. Еду, чтобы бак бензина заправить, и будут ехать. Поэтому все образуется и стабилизируется, если мы, как я говорю, голову в руках и мозги будем держать и понимать, чего мы хотим. Попытки запугать людей, склонить к предательству, чтобы дезорганизовать работу наиболее крупных промышленных предприятий, объектов транспорта, энергетики, связи, будут продолжаться. Информационная агрессия будет увеличиваться. На дискредитацию государства в глазах населения брошены огромные ресурсы. Отмечу, что на данный момент органами госбезопасности принимаются все необходимые меры по защите наших национальных интересов. Благодаря слаженной работе силового блока по выявлению и локализации угроз на ранней стадии успешно решаются задачи в сферах разведки, контрразведки, защиты конституционного строя и противодействия терроризму. Благодаря все-таки слаженной работе вашей и МВД нам удается сдерживать эти атаки. Притом, заметьте, я особо вас не тащу в сферу сельского хозяйства, там промышленности и так далее, по отдельным только элементам. Вы занимаетесь своим делом. Разведка, контрразведка, защита конституционного строя там и прочие антитеррористические мероприятия. Это ваш хлеб, который вы должны кушать. Если ситуация обострится до невозможного, первым, кому я об этом скажу и посоветуюсь, это с вами. Поэтому каждый, как я говорил, должен заниматься сегодня своим делом. Дисциплина должна быть жесточайшая. Как только расхлябанность пойдет, особенно в ваших рядах, повторим то, что было в 2020 году, но удержать страну не сможем. Одной из мер защиты трудовых коллективов, студенчества, работников здравоохранения и иных социально значимых сфер от деструктивного воздействия является создание надежной системы контрразведывательной защиты государственных предприятий и учреждений. Вы знаете, что по данному вопросу мною приняты конкретные решения, отданы распоряжения правительству, КГБ и иным заинтересованным. В ходе сегодняшнего совещания хотел бы услышать, как они реализованы на практике, какие имеются проблемные аспекты.